DW Africa Link.
Could you imagine buying jollof rice from Accra, plantain from Kingston, coffee from Ethiopia, and rum from Jamaica, all without paying a single import tariff? Sounds like a dream, right? Well, Ghana's President John Mahama thinks it should be a reality. And when he takes over the African Union chairmanship next year, he says he will push for exactly that. That's what's coming up. Welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter. I'm Lucy Riley, your host for today.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
The African Continental Free Trade Area, or AfCFTA, launched in 2021 with an ambitious vision: reduce tariffs, build African supply chains, manufacture more on the continent, and foster intra-African trade that lifts economies. Now, Ghana's President John Mahama is proposing something even bigger. During a state visit to Jamaica last week, he announced that when Ghana assumes the African Union chairmanship in 2027, he'll push to bring Caribbean countries into AfCFTA. It's a bold idea. The African Union already recognizes the Caribbean as Africa's seventh region. But here's the catch. AfCFTA is still finding its feet. Only about 15 to 18% of Africa's exports stay within Africa. Compare that to 70% in Europe and 60% in Asia. The dream of a truly integrated African market is still a work in progress. So, should Africa fix what's already on the table before extending it across an ocean? Or is this a kind of bold Pan-African thinking the continent needs? Joining me is geopolitical analyst Fidel Amakie Owusu and DW's Isaac Kaleji. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Isaac, Mahama made this announcement in Kingston, Jamaica. How is Mahama's proposal being received in Ghana?
It's not a surprise. I mean, many people know that President Mahama, coming back to power, he's largely championed issues of Pan-Africanism. It's not that he's not done it in his first tenure, but he has been very heavy on that this time around. And a lot of Ghanaians obviously have that connection with Jamaica because largely a lot of the slaves that left the shores of Ghana, we know of reporting and historical indications that much of them are actually in Jamaica. So we have that connection with Jamaica. And so for him to make that statement in Jamaica was welcomed well. But I think the bigger picture, obviously, is that a lot of Ghanaians believe that's the way to go in Pan-Africanism. We need to broaden the scope of AfTA. So where he made a statement and the significance of that, especially because you'll be chairperson next year, obviously is something people really applaud in terms of that kind of Pan-Africanism initiative.
And a bit more about that announcement. Take us through what exactly he announced and what concrete next steps the government has laid out.
I think it's basically an idea that he put across that, well, AfTA is supposed to be for Africa, but he thinks that in the diaspora or the Caribbean, of course, you have blacks there as well. And they draw some linkage with the continent. And so, I mean, if we want to really broaden that scope, I mean, there won't be anything wrong having trading happening between Africa and countries outside the continent that you consider sisters or brothers, depending on how you want to target, right? So that is an idea he put across. And of course, he indicated that he will be pushing for that when he assumes the chairmanship role at the African Union, right? And so I think for now, it's just an idea, a concept, something he thinks. But of course, we can only talk about concrete issues when he takes that chairmanship role and then he puts across to other African leaders, and then they can discuss. It's always critical if the chairperson has some kind of an agenda and wants to convince his colleagues why this is the way to go, right? And I think that's the trigger that he's giving.
Thanks for that, Isaac. And Fidel, Isaac has talked about, trade, and it's right now it's just an idea on paper. But is it even legally possible to bring Caribbean countries into AfCFTA, or would this need sort of a separate framework altogether, Fidel?
Yes. So for a long time, Africa has been looking forward to better integration in terms of trade, because Africa traded amongst itself, or African states traded among themselves less and less, while they traded mostly with external economies like China, the United States, and Europe. So the idea that Africa needed to enhance trade has always been there, and in recent times that has been achieved through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. However, with this new proposal by the president, in fact, it is so many people are looking at the geography, the geopolitical and the geography aspect of it, that if you talk of NATO, you are talking of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So if you're talking about AfCFTA, then you are talking about Africa as a continent and not beyond. But that's besides the point, because then you are also going to look at the historical and cultural links that Africa has with the Caribbean. So yes, when the African Continental Free Trade Area was being planned, it was specifically on Africa. But in recent times, we have seen more intensified relations between Africa and the Caribbean. And the fact that we are culturally and historically linked, that allowance could be made. So as Caleb has mentioned, it's a matter of, at this stage, it's a proposal. And I believe that as it's being discussed, some of these extensions can be done, because then you don't only limit the whole discussion to continental Africa, but it can go beyond to the Caribbean. And when it happens, Africa stands to benefit from that, because the Caribbean has very robust economies that could be open to the rest of Africa. Again, the Caribbean itself has a kind of a trade area of a kind. And so if Africa has to include the Caribbean, it is not going to do that with individual countries, but it's going to do that as a bloc, or the relationship is going to be Africa and then the Caribbean. And that would help tremendously.
I mean, Fidel, in as much as it's a proposal, I only imagine that there are obstacles that perhaps would be standing in the way, be it politically, say from the African Union members or from the Caribbean governments themselves. I mean, what more can you say about those sort of challenges or hurdles that lie ahead?
Yes. So the African Continental Free Trade Area is in place, but not all countries have benefited. We have smaller economies that are showing increasing concern that, well, this may only benefit the bigger economies like Nigeria, Ethiopia, Egypt, South Africa, and the rest. And so, yes, when this proposal is brought to the table, some of these countries are going to raise some questions, or they're going to ask some questions that, well, how does this benefit us? Do we have the production capacity to take advantage of this trade or these relations? And then even for bigger economies, they are also concerned that the economies are going to become dumping grounds for the export of other countries. So initially, Nigeria was very slow into accepting the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, because it has a bigger economy. And the fear was that neighboring states or other African states may just target the largest population on the continent and just dump their goods or just export their goods in the name of free trade. So is Nigeria also going to be comfortable that Caribbean countries can have that access to its market without tariffs and other trade barriers that it imposes on other countries beyond Africa? So these are real concerns that will be discussed. And again, the president would have maximum 1 year in office as chairman of the AU. So his tenure in the AU next year is not going to be unlimited. It's very limited. And so another thing will be how to sell this to the bureaucracy, the AU bureaucracy, because after 1 year, someone must take over. And if the policy is going to be adopted, it will need to continue, because often some chairmen have had visions, but once they are off the table, you don't hear, or they are off their tenure or they finish their tenure as chairman of AU, we don't hear of such ideas again. And so is it going to be the case? And as Caleb has mentioned, in recent times, the talk of reparations, the talk of slavery and other discussions that has been centered mainly in Accra, you would say that the foreign, Asia foreign minister, like what we have in the name of Honorable Okujetu Ablakwa, may continue this discussion even after the president has finished his chairmanship. So yes, there's limitation with tenure and then concerns about African economies with the African Continental Free Trade Area as it is, as against what is to come. So definitely you will have some countries raising issues.
Yeah, there are a lot of variables that you're bringing up, and beyond how it will be benefiting those bigger economies in Africa. You've talked about Nigeria, South Africa, and also the challenge of the short time frame of the chairmanship of the AU. I'm just wondering, could a formal African-Caribbean trade agreement actually give both regions more bargaining power at the global table, against larger economies like the EU, China, and the US, for instance?
So Africa has the largest number of countries in the world as a continent. We are talking of 54 sovereign states. So at the UN General Assembly, many external powers try to lobby Africa to get as many countries as possible when it comes to voting. And at other international fora, Africa is being courted because of the number of countries. So if the Caribbean have this kind of trade agreement with Africa, then it means that that relationship can be extended to other areas like environment issues, issues with labor, migration, and things like that. And if Caribbean countries are going to join Africa, then it means that Africa is going to have more weight. And so will Caribbean countries also have more weight because Africa is definitely going to back them or see common grounds with them on other issues. So yes, such relations will go beyond trade and would rather also maximize the bargaining position of these two regions vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So I believe that, yes, that is very consequential.
Yeah, and speaking of which, would those larger economies make, see this, for instance, as a threat? What would they make of these deeper Africa-Caribbean relations or this new economic bloc, do you think?
Yes, so recently, I realized that Caribbean countries did not have so much relations or so much economic relations with sub-Saharan Africa. Most of these relations had centered on North Africa, so Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt. But in the past half a decade and maybe over, we've seen more interest by these Caribbean countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So as I mentioned, it has to do with culture, it has to do with history. And increasingly, African heads of state are being hosted in the Caribbean and vice versa. And with that, what it means is that there is this consciousness of these two regions coming together, regardless of what other powers may think. And in this multipolar international system, where many centers of power are emerging, we've had now the so-called middle powers also emerging. And I think that when Africa get closer to the Caribbean, together they can form a middle power of a block of some sort. Two blocks coming together, they can have that weight in the international system. And I don't believe that other powers would have that kind of insecurity with such relations because, there's little any power can do about it. And I believe when this is done, it only, as I mentioned, benefits the international standing of these two blocks that would work together on other areas of international development.
Okay, thank you for that, Fidel. Isaac, which Ghanaian sectors actually stand to gain the most if this proposal actually takes off?
I think largely all sectors could benefit. Ghana isn't so much heavy on manufacturing. I think largely the idea of AfCFTA is also to empower many African countries to go into manufacturing. But of course, we know that there are initiatives. We have some initiatives in in let's say our cocoa sector, where some businesses are trying to process more. I mean, that could give opportunity to expand that. We know, of course, we have gold, and again, there's been an idea to try and process more here. Of course, yes, we are drilling oil. The idea will be to be able to get that. But of course, largely in the textile sector, we have a good sector that could also get our fabric out there. And there are so many sectors I could talk about. The whole idea, obviously, I think, is that even without the Caribbean coming in, we already know that after itself, there's a bit of challenge having a lot of countries being able to cross that kind of border challenges and get their goods out there. But in agri, in other sectors, we can actually get our products out there to other African countries. But largely, I think the same, like Fidel said, it's still the same issue. Some many challenges that still have to be crossed or tackled before we could see this being utilized properly. At the end is to make sure Africa, many countries are industrialized, they can produce where they have competitive advantage and get those products across the continent and vice versa. Yeah.
Isaac, we'll talk more about, I'm sure you've been speaking to businesses on the ground, but Fidel, there's something that Isaac has talked about, and that is, the elephant in the room, which is the challenge of these businesses, even crossing their goods from one country to another. And so the big question, Fidel, really is, should Africa fix what is already on the table before extending it across an ocean, for instance? Or is this actually the kind of bold Pan-African thinking that the continent needs?
Yeah, so interestingly, it is very easy for African countries to trade with external actors than among themselves. Even now, recent times I've tried crossing some borders, and I saw the challenge that despite regional integration, that is even political, we still have challenges at the borders. That if you were in Ghana and you wanted to move to Togo, you should have some kind of, as long as you have your passport, you should have some free entry and stay for some 90 days before any questions could be asked. But you get to the border, and if the frustration at the border will tell you that, well, what we have on paper is always different from what is on the ground. So yes, Africa has a lot of challenges, and in terms of the continental free trade area, we are still crawling because not so much has been achieved. And so one would say that why don't you just concentrate within and then maximize what you have and then extend it out. But the interesting thing is that it is even easy. It will be more easier for us to trade with the Caribbean than to trade among ourselves, even now. So I think that maybe by extending this trade agreement, we may even find more opportunities and see the more reason we should trade among ourselves. Because if, for instance, moving from one region to the other, yes, even within ECOWAS, you have problems. Some time back, we used to export oranges from Ghana to Nigeria. And by the time the oranges got to Nigeria, you find about half of it rotten because the various borders, you find the cargo being stopped between the border and the border between Ghana and Togo, Togo and Benin, and then Benin and Nigeria. And all this time, you find a lot of frustration. And by the time the oranges go to the market in Lagos, Nigeria, you find about half of it rotten. And traders running at loss and making a lot of losses. And that is difficult to recover because, loans and things like that. So then one would say that we better enhance the system from within. But then again, we can do both concurrently. Because as I said, perhaps some lessons will be learned from African Caribbean trade and then applied within the borders of Africa.
Okay. Isaac, I'm going to bring you back in here now. So what exactly are businesses and trade groups in Ghana saying about this proposal? Are they optimistic or looking forward to it? Or do they find it as a threat? What are you hearing?
No, I think businesses don't really see it as a threat. It's good for them to have more markets, right, to send their goods. If there'll be challenges on the continent trading and the Caribbean countries, obviously, will offer the market for them. They'll pick it, they'll take it if the trade terms are good. I think largely people see it as a good idea. Even though there are still challenges, like Fidel mentioned about the continent and trade, it still doesn't prevent people from dreaming, right, that things will get better. I mean, our businesses I have spoken to largely will welcome taking their goods to as many countries across the world that they can go to and get clients for their businesses or whatever they are doing. So it's a welcome idea. I think, yes, again, is to see how it will materialize, whether sooner or it's going to take a couple of years, right? Like Fidel said, I mean, even if President Mahama is to chair the EU next year, is obviously just for 1 year, right? And then another EU chairperson will come. But if it is institutionalized and the African Union itself through the Commission is able to have this really work and added to the AfCFTA Secretariat, then you see that it will prolong for many years. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to give you, Fidel, the closing remarks here. I mean, if you were advising Mahama today on how to turn this idea into a real workable framework, what is the one thing or maybe even two things that you would tell him to focus on?
Yeah, so one very great opportunity is tourism because of the cultural and historical links that Africa has with the Caribbean. In Ghana has reaped a lot from this tourism because Caribbean countries or nationals of Caribbean countries have come to Ghana a lot, and they have visited very nice places across the country. And I believe that that can be extended to other African countries because most of these Caribbean nationals would like to know their roots in Africa and how that linkage is important to them. Now, the other thing I will say is that, as Caleb has agreed to, we have to institutionalize this idea. So the AU bureaucracy must buy into the idea, and then the African Continental Free Trade headquarters, which is based in Accra, must also adopt this, and these discussions must be held so that it can be implemented in the long term. Because then, if we rush it, we may not be able to achieve what we seek to achieve. And so we must be more incremental, more systematic, and more procedural in making sure that we build something right from the foundation, very strong and enduring.
Isaac, perhaps maybe just a last one from you. 1 year from now, what would tell you that this proposal is genuinely moving forward rather than just being another speech?
Well, I think, of course, you need to take a first step, which obviously will be to have this table that the African Union accepted. You have the Caribbean leaders come in, and you have that ceremonial event like that. I mean, we love to see, right, to have that launch. I mean, that is the first step, obviously. But I think that moving from there is to now have it work. Of course, I think we would also need to measure our expectation, right, and be patient. I think the first step is just have it launched. If indeed President Mahama can have this table next year and have the African Union accept it, which I think they will, I don't think it's a bad idea, then obviously that's the first step. Just like, of course, we had it after launched. There, even though there are challenges with the implementation, we still have it there and you can work on it, right? So you have that idea launched, and then I think that we could get things going. But I still think we should be measured and then hope that, like Fidel said, those bureaucratic challenges we have in all institutions, not just in Africa, across the world, when it comes to largely dealing with governments, can be tackled, and we could see this being a reality. But I see it into the future, not something quite immediate. Yeah.
All right. That was geopolitical analyst Fidel Amachi Owusu and DW's Isaac Kaledzi. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today.
Thank you. Well, nice and
thank you.
Africa is changing. Don't get left behind. Tune in to Africa Link.
For Africans and Caribbeans alike, this is more than a trade deal. It's about identity, opportunity, and whether ties across the ocean can finally translate into shared prosperity. The ancestors taken from these shores never got to trade freely between Africa and the Caribbean. Mahama's question is whether their descendants finally can. What do you think? Share your thoughts on Facebook and TikTok at DW Africa. Listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show was co-produced and edited by Isaac Mugabi. I'm Lucy Riley. Bye for now.
DW. Made for Minds.